You have much more influence than you actually know. Hi, it's Peter Merrick, and I'm in La Jolla, San Diego, and I'm making this video about three people I believe had a greater influence on our decadent society than has been given attention to. I thought about going back to school and doing a PhD on these three people. I would love to write an essay on these three people, and I'm going to share with you who they are and the impact they had on our society. The fact that our society is built with people who are more interested in feeding their appetites than thinking and living up to their responsibilities. They're more concerned with their rights than their obligations. So, who are these three people that had this impact on our society that no one ever focuses on? The first one is Dr. Spock. Now, after World War II, we had the baby boom. And many of these young parents who were having tons of children needed assistance. And there was a book that came out from Dr. Spock. He was a pediatrician who wrote a book which became the parent's guidebook. And in it, he recommends that parents fulfill their children's needs. Instead of you being the leader, follow the child. The child cried, pick them up. Do not punish the child. Do not give them direction. Feed into their appetites. Now, many of our leaders right now happen to be children who grew up having their parents take advice from Dr. Spock. What is very revealing is Dr. Spock in the 1960s. He joined those babies who became adults who wanted to take down society. So he had a huge impact on the psychological, emotional profile of an entire generation that has actually led us to where we are now. Look at the leaders we've had in the last few years. They are all products and have been influenced by Dr. Spock. He led the protest. He encouraged these babies who became adults to tear down the system. That is the first person. The second person is Theodore Gessel, Dr. Seuss. Now, most people don't know much about Theodore Gessel, but during World War II, he was a propagandist for the US government. He actually won an Academy Award for shorts that were propaganda being played both at home and also to the troops abroad. If you go and look at his earlier drawings that were in his propaganda cartoons, you will see that the way he portrayed Germans and Japanese are much like the characters he later on had in his books. And he had a huge influence on me. And when I read his book as an adult, I started realizing how brilliant he was. He was able to take very complex messages and put it in a way that would influence children that they would not recognize that it was happening. And the last person would be Pete Seeger. Pete Seeger was a folk singer, and he was quite big in the late 40s and early 50s. And then he was called in front of Congress during the Black Scare about the communists. And he exercised the First Amendment, not the fifth, the first, that he had rights of association. See, because Pete Seeger was a very active communist, and he received, after that, blacklisting, meaning that he could not be played on radios, he could not play in concerts. So what did Pete Seeger do? He started to write children's songs with very strong messages. And those children who listened to his songs, they became the radicals of the 60s, and they started inviting him to perform on campus during the times where there was huge protests within society, where people were moving away from being responsible to decadence and immaturity and no initiation into adulthood, which means being responsible. These three men have really not been looked at. I do not know if they were a product of the time or if they were the catalyst for the decadence that we have right now. I do not know their involvement more than they had this incredible influence. So let me just recap. Dr. Spock told parents to indulge their children. Dr. Seuss, Theodore Gessel, put messages in his books that most people would not actually step back and see what they were reading to their children, putting little propaganda messages into his books. And Pete Seeger sung to these children. And later on, he was playing on those same campuses to those same kids who were singing his tunes when they were kids. These three gentlemen, I believe, I nominate to be part of the decadence, spoiledness, ignorance that led to today. And don't take my word for it. Do your own investigation. Have an awesome day.